Hello. This week's portion, Chayye Sarah, is the only portion named after a woman. It opens with the death of the Matriarch Sarah at age 127. Quote, Sarah's lifetime came to 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. That was the span of her life, unquote. Why did the Torah not just say 127 years? The Midrash answers, quote, when she was 20, she was as beautiful as when she was 7. And at 100, she was as sinless as a woman of 20, which is the age below which heaven does not punish for sin, unquote. Many commentators have told us in many different ways that Sarah was a very good woman, a sinless woman. Many, but not all. The Ramban from 13th century Catalonia pushes back on the Midrash, noting that the repetition of the word years was just a common expression and was also used for Ishmael's life, even though he was not righteous, except for his final repentance. Quote, and these are the years of the life of Ishmael, 100 years and 30 years and 7 years, and he expired and died and was gathered to his people, unquote. That phrase was also used for Abraham himself. Quote, and these are the days of the years of Abraham's life in which he lived, 100 years and 60 years and 15 years. However, the sources don't interpret it in the positive way the Midrash does. Only Rashi does, but he gives no source. How righteous was Sarah? First, she and Abraham convert many people to monotheism on their way to the Holy Land. Abraham converts the men and Sarah the women. A point in her favor. Second, when a famine strikes the Holy Land and Sarah and Abraham must go to Egypt for food, Abraham tells her to say she is his sister so they won't kill him, even though it means she will be taken to Pharaoh's harem. She accepts to save both their lives. Is that a point in her favor? No, because while in Judaism lies are acceptable to save lives, sexual immorality is not. And the patriarchs and matriarchs were said to follow the Torah even before it was revealed. Then there are 3 points against her. First, she laughs when God tells her she will have a son in her old age. Rashi writes, Sarah had no faith and sneered, and that is why God was angry with her. Second, she denies having laughed. The Ramban writes, I am astonished with the righteous prophetess Sarah. How could she contradict that which God had said to the prophet Abraham and also disbelieve the words of the angels of God? Third, she implies to strangers that Abraham is not able to have intercourse anymore, which was uncalled for. Quote, and Sarah laughed to herself, saying, now that I am withered, am I to have enjoyment when my husband is so old? Unquote. God has to tell a white lie for Shalom Bayit when reporting her words to Abraham. Quote, then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh, saying, shall I in truth bear a child old as I am? Unquote. Her assumption was also false. Abraham had the last laugh when he had 6 more sons when he married Keturah after Sarah died. There's also the matter of Sarah's treatment of her maid Hager. Sarah can't conceive, so she asked Abraham to sleep with Hager, to have a son she could consider her own. Quote, and Sarai said to Abram, look, the Lord has kept me from bearing. Please go into my maid. Maybe I shall have a son through her. And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Is this proper? It was certainly customary. The Ramban adds that Sarah wants Hagar to be a legal wife, a point for Sarah. Quote, Abraham did not plan on building a family with Hagar rather than Sarah. His only intent was to do Sarah's will so she would be pleased. Sarah wanted Hagar to also be Abraham's wife, so he would have a child with a wife and not just a concubine, unquote. Rashi writes that a son through her means a son through the merit that I admit her as a rival into my house. Is this another point for Sarah? or only self-serving. Sforno has another view. Quote, Sarah hoped that the jealousy which would develop within her when she saw that Hager gave birth to a child for Abraham would stimulate her own biological and sexual urges so that in due course she too would become pregnant by her husband. So Abraham sleeps with Hagar and she gives birth to Ishmael, progenitor of the Muslims. Hagar acts haughty and impertinent towards her mistress. Tradition tells us that she was the Egyptian daughter of Pharaoh. The Midrash says, quote, Hagar would tell visiting ladies, my mistress Sarai is not inside what she is outside. She appears to be righteous, but she is not righteous. Had she been a righteous woman, see how many years have passed without her conceiving, whereas I conceived in one night, unquote. Sarah is furious, runs to Abraham and tells him, the wrong done to me is your fault. Hamasi alecha. Why was it Abraham's fault that Sarah suggested Abraham sleep with Hagar? A point against Sarah. Abraham wants out of the whole matter. Quote, Abraham said to Sarai, your maid is in your hands. Deal with her as you think right, unquote. So Abraham gives Sarah carte blanche to deal with Hagar as she sees fit. Radak from 13th century France explains, quote, Abraham meant that in spite of Hagar sleeping with him, that is, being accorded wifely privileges, she remained Sarai's slave, and as such, Sarai could determine how to treat her, unquote. Sarah then swiftly retaliates. Quote, then Sarai treated Hagar harshly, and Hagar ran away from Sarah. What did Sarah do to her? The Midrash says, quote, Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana said, she forbade her from having sexual intercourse with Abraham. Rabbi Berachia said, she slapped her face with a slipper. Rabbi Berachia said, in the name of Rabbi Abba Bar Kahana, she made her carry water buckets and bath towels to the baths, even though it might endanger her pregnancy, unquote. The Midrash also says she cast the evil eye on her, and as a result, she miscarried. The basis for assuming a miscarriage is that the angel told Hagar, you will conceive, yet we were told before that she was already pregnant. Jealousy is stronger than all other considerations, a point against Sarah. The Ramban's judgment is unforgiving. Quote, our mother Sarah sinned in this oppression of Hagar, and also Abraham in permitting her to do so. And Hashem heard that Hagar was oppressed and gave her a son who would be a wild ass of a man to oppress the descendants of Abraham and Sarah in all kinds of oppression, unquote. The Ramban believes that this is the cause for bad relations between Jews and Muslims in his time. This is even truer in our time. After her escape, Hagar is met by an angel who acknowledges she was treated very badly. Quote, and the angel of the Lord said to her, go back to your mistress and submit to her harsh treatment. Behold, you will conceive and shall bear a son. You shall call him Ishmael. God hears, for the Lord has paid heed to the oppression you have endured, unquote. Radak from 13th century France and Tur HaAroch from 14th century Spain echo the Ramban. Quote, Sarah's actions were not pleasing in the eyes of the Lord. This is reflected in the words of the angel to Hagar. The Lord has paid heed to the oppression you have endured. This is why the angel gave her a blessing as compensation for the harsh treatment she had suffered. Abraham did not prevent Sarah from acting as she did, even though it was displeasing in his eyes, because he was concerned primarily with preserving his relations with Sarah. This whole story is preserved for all future generations to warn us not to indulge in injustice. Tur HaAroch. Both our matriarch Sarah and her husband were guilty of a sin here. Abraham's sin was that he did not intercede on behalf of Hagar. As a result, God listened to her complaints and granted her a son. whose descendants in turn would oppress the descendants of Abraham and Sarah to this day, unquote. Finally, there's the matter of Sarah's expulsion of Hager and Ishmael. After Sarah gives birth to Isaac at age 90, she wants Hager and Ishmael out. So Sarah saw Ishmael, the son whom Hager, the Egyptian, had born to Abraham, making sport, mitzahek, meaning mocking, playing. She said to Abraham, "Cast out that slave woman and her son, for the son of that slave shall not share in the inheritance with my son Isaac," unquote. What did Ishmael do wrong? The Midrash, based on analogies of language with other verses, lists violation of all three cardinal sins. Why else would Sarah be so upset? Quote, Rabbi Ishmael taught, making sport refers to idolatry. Sarah saw Ishmael build altars, catch locusts, and sacrifice them. Rabbi Akiva lectured, this refers to nothing other than sexual immorality. Sarah saw Ishmael ravish maidens, seduce married women, and dishonor them. Rabbi Elazar said this refers to murder. Rabbi Azariah said in Rabbi Levi's name, Ishmael said to Isaac, "Let us shoot arrows." Then he aimed in Isaac's direction while pretending to be playing, unquote. But the Midrash also has a dissenter. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, making sport refers only to inheritance. Ishmael said, I am the firstborn, so I am going to receive a double portion of the inheritance, unquote. The Ramban subscribes to the above because Sarah's reaction refers only to an inheritance. He defends Ishmael, saying, is it possible that such a righteous man as Abraham would have idolatry, sexual immorality, and murder in his house? God forbid. Yet we know that Esau was raised by the righteous Isaac and still turned out evil. Did Ishmael just display sibling rivalry, jealousy at not being the only child anymore? Kli Yakar from 16th century Prague argues that Sarah was only worried about Ishmael's bad influence on Isaac. Quote, banishment does not prevent a son from inheriting possessions. Rather, what she meant was that Ishmael would never inherit Abraham's good character. Hence, he must be banished to prevent him from influencing Isaac. Indeed, even Abraham later also tried to insulate Isaac from the influences of his own sons. Quote, Abraham willed all that he owned to Isaac, but to Abraham's sons by concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east. Unquote. Abraham is disturbed by Sarah's requests. The matter distressed Abraham greatly, for it concerned a son of his. God said to Abraham, do not be distressed over the boy or your slave. Whatever Sarah tells you, do as she says, for it is to Isaac that offspring shall be continued for you. Unquote. Why would God agree to this unless Ishmael was truly a failure? In the end, Hager and Ishmael are expelled in the desert and soon run out of food and water. God intervenes, quote, then God opened Hagar's eyes and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and let the boy drink. God was with the boy and he grew up, unquote. Did Sarah act properly, sending them out in the wilderness with limited supplies without knowing that the miracle would save them? A point against her? Yet it is hard to label things sinful when God approves. But how can he? Does the end justify the means for God but not for us? How do we deal with God's plan of requiring some suffering by design? Another possible interpretation of the opening line in our portion, which does not contradict the Midrash, is as follows. For the first 20 years of her life, Sarah was technically sinless, as the Midrash notes. During 100 of her remaining years, Sarah was truly sinless, in that she did not do anything wrong. During 7 of her remaining years, which are not consecutive, she committed some sins. In conclusion, biblical figures all have their good and bad sides, which makes it possible for us to identify with them and understand how hard the decisions they had to make were. Nobody's perfect. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs notes, quote, "The moral life is not something we understand in depth all at once. We realize how difficult some decisions are. Do I show compassion to my servant's child at the risk that he may be a bad influence on my child who has been chosen by God for a sacred mission? People also are complex." Excuse me. No one in the Torah is portrayed as perfect. Noah, the only person in Tanakh to be called righteous, ends up drunk and disheveled. Moses, Aaron, and Miriam are all punished for their sins. So is King David. Solomon, the wisest of men, ends his life as a deeply compromised leader. Many of the prophets suffered dark nights of despair. Ecclesiastes says, quote, "There is none so righteous on earth as to do only good and never sin." In the opposite direction, he says, even the non-heroes have their saving graces. Esau is a loving son, and when he meets his brother Jacob after a long estrangement, they kiss, embrace, and go their separate ways. Levi, condemned by Jacob for his violence, counts Moses, Aaron, and Miriam among his grandchildren. Even Pharaoh, the man who enslaved the Israelites, had a moral heroine for a daughter. The descendants of Korach sang psalms in the Temple of Solomon. This too is moral maturity, light years removed from the dualism adopted by many religions. In Judaism, the moral life is about learning and growing, knowing that even the greatest have failings and even the worst have saving graces. Shabbat Shalom.